History is not destiny. This is a quote from the book I've been reading by Yuan Ang, How China Escaped the Poverty Trap. The author did an extensive research on how a country, China in this case, escaped poverty despite being faced with all the characteristics that poor countries have, which makes them poor. You see, many political economists have tried to understand what makes rich countries rich and poor countries poor. By comparing rich countries to poor countries, they brought out features that are prominent in the former and absent in the latter. These are good governance, protection of private property rights, professional bureaucracies, modern courts, and so on. Three theories were contemplated by the author based on what different economists proposed, and she argued against them. The first is good governance leads to growth. This is the modernization theory. They claim that if poor countries can be jump-started with capital investment to promote growth, then good governance will emerge naturally. It is where the idea of foreign aid comes in. But she argues that this does not explain the origin of economic growth and that many studies have found very little or no impact of foreign aid in poor countries. The second theory is that good governance leads to growth. This is widely held by many Western international organizations that if poor countries copy and paste the type of governance system of rich countries, then they will naturally become rich. However, if this was the case, many poor countries that have been copying the governance system of rich countries would have become rich by now. The third theory was proposed by Acemoglu and Robinson that wrote the book Why Nations Fail, and they won the 2024 Nobel Prize in economics with Simon Johnson. Their theory is based on the history of the country, which determines the type of institutions they will have and which will ultimately determine whether they will become rich or poor countries. It is based on this third theory that the quote, "History is not destiny," was referenced by the author. The third theory is where inclusive and extractive institutions come into play. I've made a video on it some time back. You can always watch it on my page. But they fail to satisfactorily explain how China achieved sustained growth despite not having inclusive institutions. But what Professor Ang explains as the reason for China's economic growth and escaping the poverty trap can be summarized as using what you have to grow. Through co-evolution, institutions will grow to meet the specialization and professionalism required for sustained growth. It is more detailed than this, but I would like to deviate from the book here. You see, for many African countries, what we have is not really ours. Pre-colonial Africa consisted of many empires, kingdoms, city-states, and so on. The place we call Nigeria today was a vast land that consisted of Kanem Borno Empire, Hausa city-states that later became the Sokoto Caliphate, Oyo Empire, Ife Kingdom, Nupe, Kwararafa, Benin Kingdom, Nri Kingdom, Arochukwu Confederate, the Efe Kingdom, and so many more. The colonialists came and said, from today onwards, you are all one people, and your lingua franca is English. We were given a template to use as our system of government, and since then, we have been struggling to fit into it. Our traditional institutions that worked for us before was relegated to ceremonial and advisory functions. In some cases, they were even branded as primitive and they were discarded completely. But that was what we had. We still hold on to many of our traditional ways and institutions, but that has no effect on our governance and economics. We live parallel lives. One, where we try to fit into a foreign template for our governance and economics, and another one that we go home to and we believe in it. There's a choice we may have to take. It is either we fully adopt our traditional system and bring it forward to govern us, similar to Malaysia, or we discard it completely and become fully westernized so that we can fit into the template that was handed over to us. Although this goes against the findings by Professor Ang on China because her model proposes using what you have to achieve economic growth. The Nigerian perspective can be viewed in two ways: whether we should make the system better or should this even be the system to begin with. I would like to hear your thoughts, guys. Let me know in the comments. Bye, guys.